So Wednesday we'll see the last round of the Champions League phase games, match day 8. When this new format was introduced, James, this was one of the big selling points, live table, fans glued to multiple matches, loads going on, loads on the line. This is the second year, obviously. Has it worked out like that?
No. I've never been a fan of this format. The idea that, there's no dead games is obviously a fallacy.
Yeah.
The fact that the top 8 doesn't really mean too much. I think the biggest change this season actually is that the top 2 will be at home in the second leg all the way to the final. I think that is a genuinely significant advantage, arguably more so than being in the top 8. Of course, you've got 2 extra matches you could go out. But what this format has done is dilute the importance of big teams meeting each other. I understand it if you're a casual fan and you think, oh, Inter Milan are playing Arsenal, great, 2 big teams this early in the season, let's watch it. Does it really matter? No.
Pre-season friendly, wasn't it?
This is it, and unfortunately, and I think we all knew this was coming anyway, that just the dilution of the format has not added to the overall quality, and it's reduced the jeopardy. And yeah, look, all these games kicking off at the same time, it's going to be an exciting Wednesday night, and the live table will be, we'll do great traffic on all sorts of websites, but I don't think it's come at a too high a price, really.
You mentioned the advantage then of the top 2 having second legs at home all the way through, but is that really an advantage? Because the reason I asked that is last season, Real Madrid, Arsenal really capitalised on being at home first. Basically got an unassailable lead before they went to the Bernabeu. And I think there's an argument that unless you're Liverpool, who obviously have the Anfield factor, as we can attest to, being at home first gives you the chance to get a lead, which means you can just go away and defend. So, I don't know, what do you think it's an advantage to be at home second?
Well, I mean, the whole thing raises questions about what's actually an advantage or not. It's like the top 8, you've got Liverpool, Tottenham, Newcastle, Chelsea and City, all on match day 8 vying for a place in the top 8 and their kind of place in this table. Does it actually matter? PSG kind of showed last year that it doesn't really. Yeah. Is there any? What I'm trying to ask and answer your question: is there any kind of advantage to be had? Do you think in where you finish in this table, whether it's second or 22nd?
Yes, I think there is. To the extent that I take your point, Mark. I think it's an interesting one. I would say though, if you ask the managers, would you want the second leg home or away? They would say home every single time. And I think it's important for the Premier League teams to not have 2 extra games. I think that was certainly a motivation for Arsenal and
especially
Arteta.
Arsenal and City with going deep in both competitions domestically.
To not have those 2 extra, obviously high-profile, tense matches, knockout games, to save yourself from that. But in terms of your prospects of winning the competition, if we're now talking about the serious contenders for it, the heavyweights who are there every year, I don't think it really matters, does it? I mean, you look at the table here. I mean, we should probably pick out couple of fixtures. I think that Napoli Chelsea is the big one, isn't it? That Napoli 25th are currently below the line. They could go out. Chelsea are right on the brink. They're 8th at the moment in the automatic places, but obviously could drop down into the playoffs. And you've got 7, 8, 10 teams maybe separated by 4 or 5 points. I mean, it is quite. Yeah. It is. I can see the appeal of it, but I just think the jeopardy on paper is not matched by the jeopardy in reality.
I mean, I'm not sure I can't think of a comparable game, but last year City played Real Madrid in the playoffs, didn't they? And that was the one that City were knocked out, and that was a real jeopardy game. The teams that are in there now, I mean Juventus, Napoli. I just don't see any of those teams being a real kind of fear factor. Certainly for the Premier League teams, the Premier League seems to have dominated this season's competition. Even Tottenham are terrible in the Premier League, but they're 4th, 5th right now.
5th. Well, I mean, let's talk a bit about that. I mean, Arsenal, Liverpool, Spurs, Newcastle, Chelsea. That's 5 of the top 8 from the Premier League, and City are on goal difference. They're not in there. They're down in 11th. They're on the same points as Chelsea, Newcastle, and Paris Saint-Germain, who are 6th, 7th, and 8th. So, what does this say about A, the Premier League, and B, the strength of the Champions League that English teams have been so dominant in this group stage?
I just think we're going to go back to the kind of old narrative that the Super League's here. It's just called by a different name. The Premier League is the Super League. They're just teams in Europe. Most of the teams in Europe can't compete with the financial advantage that the Premier League teams have got. And you look at, Tottenham was a great point. Newcastle as well. Newcastle have struggled at times in the Premier League this year. They probably have more competitive games, in those mid-band Premier League fixtures than they do in the Champions League. In the Champions League, they've won 4 out of 7. Tottenham have won 4 out of 7 as well. Lost once.
Well, Arsenal made 7 changes to last season's finalists, Inter Milan, and won comfortably. 7 changes.
I mean, Inter's been the outlier, haven't they? But in recent years, in terms of getting to a couple of finals. But I think we both expect that come certainly the knockout stage, the last 16-8, it'll be Bayern Munich, PSG, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and 4 Premier League sides. That seems to be the way it's trended.
What I've been interested in, I mentioned this to someone on our desk last week, that you talk about the strength of the Premier League. Often the argument is the Premier League is a strength in depth as strong as La Liga. If you look at the table, Villarreal, who I think are about 3rd or 4th in La Liga, are 35th in the Champions League table. They've drawn 1 of 7 games, lost 6. Athletic Club, who obviously got to the semi-finals of the Europa League last year, are down in 23rd. The big 2 in Spain are behemoths in their own right in Barcelona and Real Madrid, but doesn't say much for the comparable strength of La Liga, that in theory their 3rd or 4th best team in Villarreal are right all the way down in the second from bottom.
Frankfurt, the Bundesliga, Frankfurt are really struggling. They've been terrible this year, Frankfurt, in the Champions League.
But where that sort of the power of competition, if you like, helps that maybe the teams in the autumn and the winter, does it actually become a bit of a hindrance in the spring when, Barcelona could say rest 11 players and probably win their La Liga game, whereas Arsenal or Liverpool would maybe have a massive game where they can't.
That's the interesting thing. Over the last 20 years, the Premier League haven't generated the number of Champions League winners that they should have done, given the strength of the squads. And it's all because of that, I think, that when it gets really tough, Guardiola used to go through this thing, and it used to happen every single year. There was a week in April where he said that you would play an away game in the Premier League, you'd play a Champions League quarter-final second leg or semi-final first leg against a really tough team, and then you'd probably have an FA Cup semi-final at Wembley the weekend after. Again and again and again, he just said even Premier League squads cannot cope with that workload in the same week. And he ended up resting loads of players for FA Cup semi-finals. He couldn't get to a final for ages. They got knocked out of Champions League quarter-finals and semi-finals because they couldn't manage the workload compared to the Premier League. Obviously, eventually he managed it and got over the line with the treble in 2023. But he always said that it was very, very tough for a Premier League team to win the Champions League because of that exact point.
But I've no sympathy with that argument because we all know that Pep's got incredible resources at City. He's got a huge squad. And if you're really that obsessed with winning the Champions League as he has been and he has done it, just use your kids in the Carabao Cup. Use them in the FA Cup and then take your chance. And if you get knocked out, you get knocked out. But prioritise the bigger trophies. If you're going to try and win all 4, you're going to find it hard because it's hard for that reason. There's too many games. But that's why you build a big squad. We know that we don't quite know yet. We're beginning to see a little bit in terms of how much of an impact the Club World Cup will have on these teams. Yeah. City, Chelsea, Real Madrid, PSG. We'll still wait to see that one. But I imagine that Real Madrid and PSG will handle it better than Chelsea and Man City.
I was just looking at last season, just with Arsenal, obviously missing out on the league, just sort of reminding myself between the Premier League games, between the Champions League games, and that Real Madrid tie, they drew between those 2 games, they drew 1 all at home to Brentford. Hugely damaging result. Champions League semi-final, first leg lost 1-0, then lost at home to Bournemouth before they went to PSG for the second leg, and then off the back of that second leg, they went to Anfield and drew 2-2. And the effect is obvious, and the cumulative effect of competing on 4 fronts, like Arsenal are trying to do this season. I think it's their 34th or 35th game, 34th game, I think, of the season already. They could be playing 64 matches, something like that, if they get through to everything. I mean, it's gonna. I know what you mean about the squad size, but no squad can really cope with that without, especially if you have a few injuries and you're starting to overload players. It becomes a.
Well, that's why I was so surprised at the strength of the City team in Norway last week at Bodø Glimt. Obviously they lost the game, but it's a game that they could afford to lose. Really, why played Haaland from the start? Why played Rodri? Because these guys need a rest, and Haaland had, until the Wolves game at the weekend, had played so many games. These are the guys you need to rest for the end of the season. Bear in mind that Haaland had played right from the start of the Club World Cup last summer. So, Pep's got to be careful.
There are questions about Pep's rotation because he was saying on Friday that he was basically talking about injuries as something out of his control. And Ruben Diaz is one of the injuries that he's got that's had quite a big impact. He's out with a muscle injury, but he went through a stage, I think it was 8 or 10 games where he played 90 minutes. And a lot of City fans at the time were saying, well, why you can't sort of bemoan the fact that Ruben Diaz has got a muscle injury when you had a chance to rest him. You could have played Kusnov earlier and he didn't, obviously because he didn't trust him. But you kind of ran Diaz into the ground, he's picked up a muscle injury and then kind of sat back and gone, oh, I can't believe it. We've got injuries again. it's not my fault. Well, there is a school of thought to say that it is. Just quickly on the English teams, if the quarterfinalists of the Champions League this season were to have 6 English teams in it, do you think that would take something away from the competition? Would you like to see Newcastle against Chelsea in a Champions League quarterfinal, semi-final, or does it have to have Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, teams from different countries to add something to the tournament?
That's what you want, isn't it? You want Europe's best meeting when it matters most, not in November.
Yeah.
And that's the sacrifice that UEFA have made here is people really want to see these teams play more often, and the casual fan probably does
when it matters.
They probably do, because I'm sure the ratings will be better for Arsenal against Paris Saint-Germain in the group stage than it would be for Sporting against Atalanta or whatever. It stands to reason, but the reason why those games matter and are so iconic is because they don't come along every every 3
and there's
times
jeopardy to them as well.
Yes,
winner takes all. It's knockout stage is where it really matters. It's been the longest preamble ever. We're talking about mid-January, and he's still thinking we know who's going to go through. There's only Napoli that's a real surprise. I imagine that champions of Italy that's struggling, but I don't know. It's a tough one. 6 Premier League teams in the quarterfinals. I just don't see that.
But if it was to happen, would the competition benefit from that?
No, it'd be terrible.
No, and Europe would hate it. The other European leagues would hate it. The Premier League obviously attracts a lot of animosity for its dominance, financial dominance. Anyway, it's sort of a minor miracle, really, that the big European clubs have still been able to kind of put the Premier League in their place in terms of winning Champions Leagues. That it's not become just a complete monopoly, which it has threatened to over sort of various cycles in the last sort of 20 years.
But it's like you say, though, get to April and May, that's when the big guns in Spain, Germany, Italy can rest their players, and France and ease off, whereas the Premier League
they benefit from the winter break,
exactly.
and there's just less football in their legs, and that's why the sort of exposure and the glorification of the Premier League, the intensity of it, everything that we love about it, comes to almost home to roost in those final few weeks.
So who's going to win the Champions League? I know it's still in the league stage, but let's give it a go.
I still can't look beyond Real Madrid when you talk about Champions League. I just think that the knockout games, more so than domestic games, are decided by moments, and the more players you've got capable of creating moments in big games, the better chance you've got. So Real Madrid might not be particularly consistent in La Liga, but I just think they've got such phenomenal attacking players that they will create these moments in big knockout games, and they've still got a good chance of winning.
Yeah, my favourites are Bayern Munich. I think Harry Kane with the goals, they can take the foot off the gas in Germany. But I would say, as an outsider, despite their issues at the minute, I would never ever rule out Liverpool in the Champions League.
Well, I was going to say Bayern, but because you've said Bayern, I'll say Barcelona, because I said them last season. And again, a similar kind of argument of just the individual threat plus Marcus Rashford.
Just one quick one then. You've picked, if
that was a joke,
best placed English team to win it, you've obviously picked Liverpool.
Yeah, it's not the best place, it's just what they do, isn't it?
I think Arsenal, best placed English team to win it.
I think they're 7 from 7. You can't fault them this season. They've been fantastic, and that kind of controlled, minimised mistakes, it does maybe play a bit better in Europe. So I'd say Arsenal are probably best placed of the English teams, but I still doubt whether they quite. If we spent 45 minutes battering their lack of game management and know-how in the Premier League, I still think they've got that to prove in the Champions League too.